folks. Welcome to the 10 Laws podcast with East Forest. I am the Forest to the East, and I'm coming to you today with a podcast with Laraaji. Laraaji is sort of a legend in the world of ambient music and new age music. He's been doing it like from the beginning, over 40 years. And there's always a very famous story we don't get into in the podcast about how he was, quote unquote, discovered or met Brian Eno while he was playing in Washington Square Park in New York City. This might have been in the 70s, 80s, I don't know. But the two of them met, which led to the release of Ambient 3, Day of Radiance, which is one of Laraaji's early famous works, working with Brian Eno. And then since then, Laraaji's continued to work with a wide range of people and collaborations and his own stuff. And he does these laughter workshops and has just made his entire life a dedication into really tapping into the eternal now and the vertical now, as he likes to say, which I thought was super cool. He lives in New York still and based out of Harlem, and we got to work together for him to do a rework of the Ram Dass project, and he chose the song Like Taking Off an Old Shoe, aka Death. He sent me some music, I helped him mix it, and it is coming out on November 1st, 2019, which is the Day of the Dead. So it feels appropriate to have that song on that day. So I don't know when you're listening to this, but when I'm releasing it, that song comes out in a few days. So it's not quite out yet, but we're just giving you some background into the process. And I like to involve these artists to do just that, introduce you to new work, new worlds, and we can learn more about how these things came into to be. And of course, we get into some other subjects as well. And he's just a really, really sweet guy, and I was really happy that he could take the time to chat. The weather is shifting. Things are definitely getting colder. I'm sensing snow coming soon. I got to pick up my doggy, my puppy, yesterday, so I'm going to get some dog time for the next couple weeks before I go to China on November 12th for the At One festival out there. Hey, if you're in China, I would love to meet Chinese community. And we're working on the final touches on the Australian dates, which is in February of 2020. If you guys are out in Australia, I'm looking forward to meeting you too. But if you want to reach out and help coordinate this thing, it's a ground level effort. So let us know. info@eastforest.org is the way to reach out. And if you enjoy this podcast, thank you for giving it a review, or even better, share it on social media, post it on your socials, tell your friends about it. Just help it grow. Yeah, we're super close. I think we're like 2 ratings away from 100 ratings on Apple Podcasts, which is just a nice milestone, and it's always also helps me to get cool guests and stuff like that. So if you can take a second, give it a little rating, and give it 5 stars, give it a review. Thank you so much. Okay, let's dive into this podcast with the beautiful divine sun being known as Laraaji. Well, thank you so much for taking a little bit of time to chat. I've just really enjoyed, as I mentioned to you, getting to go a little bit behind the scenes with people about their process with these reworks. And it's also just a great chance to get to know you a little bit better. But you've got a rework you did for the Ram Dass project that's coming out on November 1st, which is the Day of the Dead, I believe. Yes, it is, which works out perfectly because you chose to rework the song Like Taking Off an Old Shoe, aka Death.
How about that?
How about that? And I just wanted to start off, before we start getting into anything philosophical about music and process, can you just tell me, like, what was it about that track that you were drawn to, or the Ram Dass sample? Like, why are you into death?
Well, I'll tell you the truth. I think, all the tracks that you sent me, and that one impressed me. But I left it up to you to select which track you would put my music to. And so I didn't make the choice, but I feel appropriate, that it is appropriate, that the idea of death is very up front and center issue we deal with either consciously or unconsciously on a daily basis. And it was very grounding for me to have words on the subject of death and dying, an upbeat dying, which I like, be voiced through Baba Ram Dass. He also very nailed it or anchored the big question, well, what do you do about death? And that track, he gave it very clearly. He says, you should identify with the soul so that you can have an upbeat death, upbeat dying.
Yeah,
So
that's not a phrase you hear very often, an upbeat dying.
Yes, and that just took some of the crinkles out of any questions I had around that. What do you do about dying? And how do you manage it? And I suspected that was it. Just identify with the whole, the universal presence. And he tied it in with the word soul, identify with the soul. So that he sort of gave me my going homework.
Yeah, you said that for a lot of us, it's unconscious or conscious in the background, and I agree that death is this ever-present energy. And I've often said that I feel like it kind of is maybe even like the biggest motivator of our lives. Almost like everything we do is in some form of reaction to this existential threat or just this fact that we know.
Yes.
Part of being alive is that we will die, and it's like the fuel of maybe everything, but it doesn't get a lot of attention in the West. We push it aside. In other cultures, it's sort of the opposite. At least in India, you see people, they burn the bodies, and death is very present in people's lives, and old people are part of the families. And so I don't know. I thought that song was important, and I liked the line too, where he says death is a ceremony, and I like this idea of a death being just that, a ceremony where you're transforming into something else. So
yes, indeed. I accept that we're not leaving, we're arriving simultaneously.
Yeah. What was your relationship to Mr. Ram Dass before you worked on this track? I mean, what roles he played in your life, if any?
I came across him in person twice. Once, I think in the 80s, he was a guest speaker at Wake Forest University in North Carolina, where I was doing or facilitating at annual Southeastern Conference, I believe it was, or one of those kind of conferences. He was there. I remember him standing in line, tall. I was surprised at how tall he was, and his smile was ever present. But before that, I read the book "Be Here Now."
Sure.
Really, I was mesmerized holding the book, looking at it, watching how it was put together, and reading the lines. And I thought the book was an induction. Reading the book, that was a game changer for me on speeding up and focusing on a higher priorities.
Yeah, me too. Me too. What are some of the things like the book Be Here Now that helped you go from a Baptist upbringing and turning into what you are now, Laraaji, and sort of your life being very dedicated to the unfoldment of the soul and the awakening of others and yourself? I mean, can you help? Were there other seminal things that you look back and are like, those were sort of linchpin moments? Probably, I would say one of those was when you went into a pawn shop and got your auto harp. But I'm sure there might have been other ideas or people.
Yes. of course, hearing sound or being aware of this nonlinear, ethereal, otherworldly music for maybe about 10 or 15 minutes and being absorbed in the hearing, because the hearing was being transformed by the object that I was hearing. And I was hearing music that was not vibrating in the third dimension, but it was an all-pervading, eternal, infinite field as sound happening, unfolding endlessly. And that experience, which I feel is not proper to talk about in past tense, but I do it. I say that it happened, but it didn't happen. It's happening now. So that experience pulled my musician visionary headset onto an unfamiliar area that is, I call it vertical music, that music for the continuous present moment. And the music that represents the wholeness of the universe here and now. And that experience happened about a month or two before the auto harp experience. So the auto harp is probably tied in, because in the pawn shop, I received an awareness of a communication. You call it a voice. And the voice was very clear and loving and suggesting, almost demanding for the good of myself and the universe, not to sell my auto harp. I mean, not to sell my guitar, but to swap it for the auto harp in the window.
Wow.
Yes. And the voice, this might have been the first time I've experienced hearing the voice that clear and that present. And maybe the voice has always been there, but due to my meditation practice at that time, I had opened myself up to a level of being present enough to hear. So it spoke, or it is speaking, and it's saying, don't take money for your guitar, swap it for the auto harp in the window. Well, I made eye contact with the instrument when I was going in, so it didn't actually use the word auto harp, but it was on the same page with me of my being, intrigued by the sight of the auto harp, the physical view of it. So I left the pawn shop and started tuning my open tune guitar visions into the auto harp, and would receive guidance and hints and hunches of how to experiment with and how to explore this instrument, in addition to using my college education around music to invent exercises and studies for the instrument. Something going on the sidewalks, eventually playing on the sidewalks of New York. And that same guidance was there to go play in Central Park at 10 in the morning, which meant that I had to betray a friend who wanted me to be at the living space where I was to help him set up for a party that evening. But I got this clear message again. Take your auto. It didn't say the auto harp. I knew what it was referring to. Pick up your instrument and go to Central Park. Leave Park Slope, go to Central Park.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I sat in Central Park in the zoo playing my zither. And there weren't many people there. And I'm thinking to myself, did I misread the voice? Did I just do a blooper? And before it was time to pack up, I was noticing that there were 2 feet standing in front of me for the longest of time. And when I finally looked up, because I play with my eyes closed, it was a man and a woman, very neatly dressed. The woman came over to me and kneeled down, and she looked at me and says, "You're psychic, aren't you?" And I'm saying, oh, here it comes. And I'd like you to meet my teacher. And this man came over to me, I've forgotten his name, and he says, and they broke it down to me. He says, we're looking for this kind of music to go behind the 7 light, something like the 7 laws of light, some kind of project he was writing. and he was up in the New England states writing it in a country home. And right on the spot, he engaged me to come up, take a bus up a day or two later, and spend time with my musical equipment to compose music for this elaborate course this teacher was preparing. Of course, that same day, I went back to the loft and I tried to explain to the man who was probably 5 years my senior and an ex-Marine, and I tried to explain to him that I left. I had to go to the park because I heard the voice.
How'd that go over?
He said, "I don't want to hear any of your muck-a-muck," and he pushed me across the loft with the force that a muscle man could. And I thought, this is the second time I've had a encounter like this. I don't want to wait for the third one. I went downstairs and grabbed a few things. I had my zither with me already, and I left and never returned to the loft. I called a lady who had was calling me about my music at that time. She bought a cassette of mine and forgot to pay me, or she paid me with a check that had bounced. And she asked me to call her, and I called her and said, "Okay, here I am." She said, "You should come by and I'll give you cash." And I somehow said, "No problem." I went to visit her on the Upper East Side that same day, and the truth came out. She figured that I had no place to stay, and she said, "You can stay in my living room." And so I crashed in a living room for about 2 or 3 months while playing on the sidewalks in New York. And it was a totally platonic setup. She was very interested in New Age and this and that, and teachers and speakers that had to do about consciousness.
What year was this, roughly?
This was, let's see, when did I loft? It was about 79, late 70s, because I was living in Park Slope at the time, and I left Park Slope around the between 77 and 79.
Okay.
And those were two powerful moments. Another powerful one was when I was going to a Tai Chi class somewhere in Stuyvesant Park over in Manhattan. And I got caught in the rain. And I couldn't find this outdoor Tai Chi class. But I remember I didn't have a hat or an umbrella, and this rain kept pounding my head. And I found shelter. And as soon as I got into shelter, I was alone. This bulk dump of a communication that I wrote down in linear form. And once again, it didn't happen. It is happening. But I wrote it out, and it was in the prose kind of rhythm. It had da-dum, 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 da-dum. And the line was, "But never rest as if you could, while parts are your main goal. For always in your current midst calls your celestial whole." Another verse and the same reoccurring line. All of that to say that it reinforced my trusting this guidance presence as my major navigation resource.
Yeah, it sounds like you're saying like your meditation at the time probably opened you up to being able to hear that voice or hear maybe what was always there. And it also sounds like when you play music, it's a form of meditation, you were saying. And
Yes.
how could you translate that for other people who are like, well, I want to hear that voice, or I want to, how can someone who maybe isn't a musician or is a musician, is there a particular technique you use or a recommendation you have to kind of hear that, to clear away that noise?
That sound, I believe, is always present. My experience of it is that it's eternal. So if it's here and artist or musician or anyone says they don't hear it and they want to know how to hear it, I would say that then your work is about getting to the present moment because it's here and finding what distracts you. I say peel off the layers of your names, classifications, titles, and do some deep breathing. Find a way to sit comfortably at the beginning with one point of focus, learning how to sit still for 21 minutes without fidgeting. Swallow your saliva. You can blink if you have to. But give yourself that interesting challenge of sitting still, breathing comfortably with all your titles relaxed from your identity. And I learned from that within 20 minutes in my early practice, that another version of the universe would slip into my awareness that had always been here. And I guess it was that practice that allowed me to hear guidance, which I can probably assume is always coming, is always here. But I put myself in a way, I brought myself to the present moment where one hears the guidance. I would say the guidance is non-linear. So you can't look for it outside of the present moment.
Right.
You can't look for it, to come from someone else, some better place, some better mountaintop. Of course, you can go to a mountaintop if you can get still there, but in the stillness, you'll contact what was already where you were before you left to go to the mountain. So getting still. And I remember hearing that term, be still and know that I am the Lord thy God. And still, I thought, just freeze up. Now I feel it, for me, it means to relax from the thinking mode of mind and invest an awareness in, I saw the non-linear mode of mind, which I call the pure I am. It's the thought that's not attached to an identity, of a linear identity. Pure I am without adding anything to the I am. So getting in touch with that feeling that I am, the I am before the titles have come in, before the classifications, before the rules. And the practice sitting still, for me, worked. For someone else, it may be walking or running. That's how they contact that still place, that still point.
Right.
Where their thinking mind is not a distraction. They're in the presence. They might be observing a thinking mind, but they're also available, witnessing a non-linear truth.
Yes, indeed. And for you, one of those doorways seems to be one of laughter as well, because you have a laughter workshop that I see you do, which I think is awesome. And is that a different color of the same thing, or is it another doorway in?
It's a way to practice the language of bliss. I believe that meditation is about finding our way back into the understanding that we are bliss. And laughter is supposedly, when you're laughing, you can't be thinking. So laughter is another way of distracting ourselves from our distraction, of bringing the awareness out of the linear verse. And heavy laughter, extended heavy laughter for 15 minutes leaves the participant in a place of natural relaxation and receptivity to meditative awareness. So that part of the workshop, participants are usually lying down on cots or yoga mats with the pillows under their legs or their knees. And I'm opening that area up with some deep relaxation suggestions and some sound, maybe gongs or zither or some chants, just to help disperse any other straggling thinking. And then let the participants just lie in a state of stillness. Some people will go to sleep. Some will, their minds might start racing again. Others may be on the momentum of that inward journey from the laughter. So laughter, as you put it, is a doorway, is a preparation for. It's intentional laughter is using laughter to vibrate the pituitary, the thyroid, the thymus, the heart, the abdominal organs, to open the lungs and the alveoli to releasing stagnant and stale air, and to open the smile. So it's a total body, total energy zap.
Even if you're kind of forcing the laughter, so you're saying the benefit is the same. Like you just cultivate it intentionally and it still works?
I say it is, but my experience is that I open up workshops with a deliberate approach to getting people into laughter. And that is, I guide people to where they effortlessly own their laughter. And that is, I guide them holding the hands of their inner child. And we get into some playful exercises at the beginning of the workshop. After doing some chanting, we get into some interactive, playful exercises to get people into the play zone, to open up the body, the breath, and to get them into the spontaneous, childlike, playful zone. Then I introduce 6 laughter sizes that in themselves become a reason for laughter, because they put people in places that would challenge their comfort zone if I hadn't prepared them to be with their inner child. And so laughter happens while you're doing the exercises, because no doubt you're in the midst of yourself saying, look at me doing this. This is crazy, man. And laughter erupts when you're with somebody else who's looking at you doing what so it becomes not silly, but you find yourself directing your laughter into areas of your body accompanied by certain body behaviors. I call them laughter mudras, that release heaviness. And that's some of the cause of the laughter, is transforming energy into light without analyzing it, transforming heaviness or tension, or things with very charged issues running around in your body, or deep subconscious stress patterns are there. You don't know how to target them or what to do about them. And laughter catches the breath, opens the breath, and allows us to, as one person said, a rotor-rooter job, to just exhale stuck, blocked, dark energy. And through this workshop, halfway through, people are laughing, singing, giggling, smiling, and their armor is down, their rigidity is off, their blocks are gone, they're in a vulnerable place. And so natural laughter, the laughter of the tribe, create a spontaneous flash tribal laughter. I guess you're helping me to verbalize some things I haven't verbalized before.
So let me ask, if someone wants to do this, is this something you're doing like when you go on tour? Like you do it during the daytime or something?
Yes, most of these workshops take place in afternoons, sometimes in the evening. I'll be doing one in Japan on the 9th of November, and I'll be doing one for the New York Winter Jazz Fest here in New York City, in addition to doing music concerts. So I usually do 2 bills, a concert performance usually in the evening, and usually a laughter workshop in the morning or afternoon, which runs 45 minutes to an hour and a half.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's especially cool because I aborted a nearly successful stand-up comedy career because I wasn't crazy about the layout of the landscape of that career. For stand-up, it meant being around cigarette smoke, being in late hours, and usually doing humor that was polarizing. And this allows me to be usually on the same level, floor level, with people in a circle. I like to work in circles and chanting. So we're getting naked right at the beginning of the workshop. Chanting is getting naked. you're actually identifying with the invisible, the transcendental, and that means you're taking off you're relaxing your earthly suit for a while. And so that takes us into that's aligned with my life practice. So I don't have to step out of my life practice to do the laughter workshops. So it's very cool.
Yeah, I dig that. I mean, I hear what you mean about like trying to being very conscious about how your work and your music and how that fits into the game of our culture and our society, and wanting to be a net benefit and not like just be part of a program that's putting people more into sleep. And it seems like that's how you found your way into music. Like that was probably the clearest path for you to express that part of your soul and sort of be of help to other souls.
Yeah, totally agree with you, Trevor. Totally.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I mean, I used to be in other forms of arts too. I was an actor and a photographer, and there are things I enjoyed doing on a certain level and I was good at, but I kind of felt like I didn't think I was helping. It's like, this is not gonna, this doesn't feel like my soul's really singing its gifts and that I'm making this place a better place as much as I could.
The soul singing its gifts. I like that.
Yeah. So I got to ask you, man, I mean, I used to live in New York, and sounds like you've been a New Yorker for a long time, and you've been doing your music now for over 40 years, and you've worked with all sorts of people, and you've got a very interesting viewpoint on life and living. Could you just take us briefly through a day in the life of Laraaji? Like when you wake up, tell us about do you have a morning practice, or what's a day like for you that's typical?
I'd like to say I do, so I could sound spiritual, but it's...
Hey, I'm the same way.
But when I wake up, I try to affirm. I used to do the affirmation that were linear based. Now my affirmations are vertical affirmations. That is just to breathe deeply and feel the self that's in the midst of the physical dimension, but is silent and observing. And to feel that timeless self that is eternal, weightless. And sometimes I do gibberish to connect with it. I might do some yoga postures, depending on where I am. If I'm on tour and my room allow it, I'll do yoga postures and breathing. And I'll sit in a comfortable chair. Sitting in lotus position is not that comfortable for me unless I have a very good pillow. So there's that. Waking up in the morning is to catch myself, to observe what thought, what universe am I stepping into today. And I try to catch myself to affirm that whatever version of the universe is waiting for me in the midst of this universe is the eternal I am, is the self that isn't concerned about a future or a past, because the present moment is the real deal. So once I do that, it's a form of mind science affirmations. Sometimes I'll do them in the mirror while I'm brushing my teeth, eye contact with myself. That there's one and only one infinite, all-pervading presence right here, individualizing as me this day, and I move forward for the greater good of all. I'm an individualization of health, love, balance, equilibrium, prosperity, wisdom, guidance. I really set myself up to be a conduit and channel for the highest in this day. I brush my teeth I try to floss and use the tongue scraper when I'm reminded. And my food is vegetarian. I tend not to focus on breakfast, but I will do juices or fruit. But vegetarian, leaning into Veganville. I like to do superfoods and greens and juices. Also, I like to avoid wearing animal products. Some of my shoes might have a hint of leather, but my clothing is orange, so I don't have to do too much thinking when I get up. Orange gives me infinite choices of orange.
Yeah, I've heard you say that was like a color of the sun or a color of just something that really excited you, and it was a sort of like playful to you.
Sun, morning and evening sun, sunset and sunrise, fire colors, transformation, joy. My first experiment with orange was during the years I was playing on the sidewalks of New York in the I think the late 70s. And one of the deals of playing in Midtown was that you could go to the Hare Krishna restaurant there and eat all you can for $5. And so musicians loved that Hare Krishna temple on the West 55th Street. And to get to the restaurant, I had to pass by the boutique. And eventually I decided to browse through the boutique for books or trinkets. And I noticed they were offering the option of buying orange clothes, I guess, for the devotees there. And I began experimenting with the color orange because I was fascinated with the impact it had on me. The idea that someone would wear this color is like a zap, an energetic zap. For me, it represents the urgency of the present moment, as urgent as the sun. I began wearing orange as a creative piece, as an art piece in progress, creative oranges. And a teacher at Ananda Ashram, the ashram upstate New York, that attracted me, or I should say that people were advising that I should go to the ashram and offer my music there. And when I eventually got to the ashram, they offered me weekend stays in exchange for my music. But the teacher there, who was listening to my music and listening to the questions I would have at meditation and satsang, said, you've been half sannyasin. It's time to go full sannyasin. And I said, well, I was vaguely aware of sannyasin, but I thought maybe this is a little extreme. I don't really know much about the Indian tradition around swamis and sannyasins. And he said, this is an honorary ceremony that you have been initiated inside, and it's trying to surface. And he gave me the name, or revealed the name of Natarajan Nadananda. And Nadananda means one who's absorbed in the bliss of sound. So he was hearing in my music someone who had been absorbed in the cosmic music, the 1974 experience. And he says, you've been half-stepping. It's time to speed up and wear full orange. And he gave me a complimentary full set of orange clothes, robes. And from that moment on, I committed myself to taking orange as a creative art piece in progress. That sometimes it touches into the saffron, other times it touches into a very energetic, electromagnetic, etheric color. But it charges me, it drives me, it's happy, and it's a uniform of service. And it also approximates the color of the sun, fire, that I would imagine that my transition from this body form to my next assignment, that it would go through cremation or fire.
Yeah.
So this is preparation for the transition point. It's like upbeat dying.
There you go. Bringing it full circle. I like that. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, doesn't your name Laraaji translate to beautiful divine sun being?
Absolutely. Yes.
So you got to dress the part.
Very much so.
You have to fake it till you make it. You've made it though. So, well, that's cool. I can definitely see how sometimes we all wear a certain kind of costume, right? But we like to pretend there's a normalcy to it. And so I love that you bring an intentionality and playfulness to your clothing as a way of saying, how can I use this as a mechanism to uplift myself and sort of remind myself of what I want to be, what I'm choosing to be, moment to moment in this now.
Yes, that is very true. And an extension of that is that I live about a block and a half from the subway. When I come down my Harlem apartment to the street and I'm going to turn left to go to the subway, I'll get this voice that says, no, turn right and take the long way down 125th Street and zap the community with your orange.
Zap the community.
And they get zapped. There's one lady downstairs. Then when she sees me, she calls me Tangerine. And people look as if they recognize, here comes the man in orange. So I feel that the color orange is a subliminal induction in that when people think or react and think, there's a man wearing orange. Look at all that orange. How's he pull that off? What they are subliminally doing is they're vibrating the sound aura, which is another name for light. You have it in the Quran, the Torah, in orange, but they're vibrating the suggestion of light, of luminosity. So in that way, they're getting a subliminal zap. They're being almost forced to vibrate the symbol of light, aura. It's involved in the sound of orange.
You're engaging in street level color therapy.
Yes, it's a non-invasive color therapy and lightening up.
So, can you tell me just a little bit about the music that you sent over for the rework for this Ram Dass song? Where that came from, or just if you can tell. I didn't know much about the background of it. If you can remember,
the music as you received it is very new age in the sense that I'm always experimenting and exploring. And just prior to recording that track for you, I was in a music store in New York City and I saw 2 or 3 new pedals that I wanted to experiment with. And when I experiment with them, I said, yes, I'm going to keep them and use them in my music. And your project was the first project I used these pedals to capture that particular nuance, energy level of music. And the music is electric zither going through effects on this open tuning. Sometimes you can call it prepared zither. Have you ever heard that term, prepared?
Yeah, in the sense that you changed the tuning and maybe customized it.
Yes, and you change it, you prepare it to serve a certain musical function other than the one it was assigned when it was created.
Right.
So I prepared it by taking off the chord bars and changing the tuning, exploring tunings. And I would compose tunings out of my heart, just like composing a painting. And other times I would sit with a favorite piece of recorded music that stayed in the same key for good period of time, and I would tune my instrument to that. And when I would turn the music off, I would have a distillation or representation of the chordal essence of that music.
Mm-hmm.
And if it was music that I liked, I would have the essence in its almost a formless state in my zither, and I could just hang out with it and explore and let it show me new valleys and mountains and ocean depths and plains. And so the music is improvisation in a tuning that has evolved, that I feel emotionally stimulates me. And I probably am mimicking how that original cosmic sound hearing experience emotionally drove me over the top, and no going back. And so I look for a very emotionally, psychologically stimulating sound hearing experience. And that's the intention behind my performing and playing and operating the zither. So much so that at some point I'm preparing, doing my calisthenics exercises, tuning, setting the equipment to record. And at some point I kind of go into the background and let a momentum express itself through the instrument, because the instrument is pretty effortless once I get it set up, so that you could say an ethereal suggestions can play through me.
Oh, I love that.
Yes. And I would just have to say that I cannot omit the strong inspiration was your offering me the opportunity to collaborate with one of my spiritual awakening heroes.
Mine too.
Yes. So that charged me too. So playing with an intention of embracing the field in which we can collab our way as the one.
Yeah, it sounds like the music faded in and then it faded out, as if like this was a moment in an improvisation, a larger improvisation you recorded that you felt was a particularly like tapped in time. Is that about right?
I forget exactly where, but classically, I was exposed to classical education. How much of it I got? Well, I used it for jazz and happy music. But when I focus on a project that involves someone not like Ram Dass, but Ram Dass, my memory of sitting at his lectures were these long pauses that he looked like he'd be thinking, or he'd go off into some other dimension, or he deliberately left space for the teaching to sink in, or for the listener to drop out of listening for a moment and just feel the essence of what's behind this meeting with Ram Dass. So honoring that, the power of silence, the necessity of silent pauses in the classical training, I find it that I can indicate or suggest softness, ethereal, timelessness, space. Leaving space is the way to handle the ethereal aspect of musical expression.
Yeah, I that's something I always felt with one of my piano heroes is Bill Evans, was the notes he didn't play. And for me, space is a big thing because I had limitations on my technique as a piano player. I wasn't really that technical. And so I was sort of forced to create a simplicity in space, which became somewhat my biggest advantage. And I love that. I loved you talking about the power of the pause, and how that inspired you from Ram Dass when you would hear him speak. It's what he didn't say.
Yes.
It's beautiful. And that's largely where he is now at 88, as he's going out of this incarnation. He isn't speaking much because it's either challenging for him or it's just pure energy now. You know, he's just emanating energy.
Were you around him when he recorded these tracks?
I recorded them. Yeah, I went over there and asked questions and recorded him. And then that was not this summer, the summer before in 2018. And then I brought it back and then wrote music around it.
Mm-hmm.
So they're all new, fresh recordings.
So you were at his estate or compound or
in
his
Maui.
Retreat? How does he call it? A center?
It's a house. It's a big old house where he lives. He's got a couple helpers and dulcimer, just some people there. A lot of people coming in and out all the time.
Okay. Had there been a residential community growing up around that?
There's a few people that help him out who live there, and then there's lots of people, kind of the sangha on the whole island. They do like a weekly kirtan there, among other events. But yeah, only a few people actually live on site.
So it's not like a big party's going on there.
Well,
it's established.
It's definitely a buoyant energy for sure.
Mm-hmm.
It's just love. It's a very loving, beautiful energy of sort of the Neem Karoli Baba devotees.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Is that someone you ever not physically crossed paths with, but was an influential guru in your life?
Not directly, only on the words of Ram Dass and seeing the picture of Baba with his, what do they call it? His blanket is
the blanket.
I call it it's a checkered with the prints on it.
Plaid. Yeah.
Plaid. That's it. Yeah, plaid, and is smiling with the hip modern beard.
Yeah.
And a smile. Yes. The stories of Ram Dass. Ram Dass talked about the time he offered him acid and he felt nothing. Mm-hmm. Or that when Ram Dass had went to visit him the first time, he was driving a Mercedes or a Jeep or a Range Rover, and he left it somewhere. And when he went to see the Rim
Maharaji.
Baba, yes, that Maharaji told him what he was thinking the day before or what was going on with him, and it flabbergasted Ram Dass. So only through Ram Dass and seeing pictures of him in yoga centers, and it's a quiet exchange.
Yeah, a quiet exchange. It's beautiful. Well, I feel like that's in some ways a cool way to summarize a lot of the work you've been doing over the decades, is a quiet exchange of the vertical now.
Yes, indeed. It has helped me to know that this is a self-balancing universe. That no matter how outrageous the patterns seem to be getting in the three-dimensional realm, at the center is timeless unity, timeless bliss, timeless equilibrium that is available. I call it our Cosmic Commonwealth. That we want to tap into it. Well, that was I had a driving force for me to tap into it. I was going to an acting world, and I felt uncomfortable without having a sense of my identity. And so I thought I'd experiment with meditation, and meditation took me deeper in a direction I didn't see coming. It took me into the transcendental. And so out of necessity, I invested time and energy in this to get my footing. And so people who don't have a driving need to practice meditation yet, maybe in their 50s or 60s, when they feel they've lived enough life and they notice that they can't get any satisfaction, or you can get things that will satisfy you, but you can't enjoy them as deeply as you thought you could, because owning things requires a sense of responsibility, and the idea of owning things is trip in itself.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we continue the journey, and hopefully as people listen to this rework, it'll just be one more doorway for people to walk through and tap into that feeling. And I know what's been cool about the project too is just opening up these words of Ram Dass to new ears, and vice versa, probably opening up some new ears to your work as well. And it's just a beautiful party, man, where we're just...
Yes, I look forward to listening to this music again and again. When is it safe to let friends listen to it?
I mean, you can let people listen to it whenever, but I wouldn't put it up publicly until at least the 1st, which is this Friday, November 1st, 2019, depending on when people are listening to this.
All right.
But I can't wait for it to get out. Day of the Dead. So perfect. And,
and I think your name is cool too, East Forest.
Thanks, brother.
Yes.
Yeah, that was East Forest came out of just a translation of my last name, which is Oswald. So if you translate that from German, it goes into East Forest. And then Ram Dass gave me the name Krishna when I was hanging out with him. So that's what I've been going with as colloquially among my friends.
Yeah. Krishna's flute, eternal current. Yes.
You know it.
Well, until the next new now.
Yeah. What's the best way for people if they want to dive into your world or find you? How do you suggest they do it?
They can go to my improvised website, laraaji.blogspot.com. Laraaji, Laraaji, 3 A's, .blogspot.
Old school. I like it.
.com. And there I try to keep it updated with what I'm doing, and some free links to some free lectures and performances and interesting things. Dig it. And if they want to use my contact me through email, I'm open to that.
All right, look out.
Laraaji@yahoo.com.
Well, you're also wherever people listen to music, they can find your music. And of course, this rework will be out soon. And that's just one of, you have what, 50 some albums you've released?
About
or releases?
20 are circulating now.
Okay.
50. So some of them were experimental. They're out for a short time.
Okay.
But yes, on Amazon, Bandcamp, Warp Music Records, Numero Group, Stone's Throw.
You're easy to find.
If you Google Laraaji, it'll come up for you big time.
Okay. Well, thank you again.
Krishna. Hare. Hare Bol.
Beautiful Laraaji.
Yes.
Blessings and love.
Peace. Thank you.
Well, that's our good friend Laraaji. Thank you so much for giving us your time and giving us some background into that track. If you want to check out that track, again, it comes out on November 1st of 2019, depending on when you're listening to this. But it's part of the Ram Dass reworks, and this is the Laraaji rework. It's our little term for remix. But can't wait for you guys to hear that. All right, everybody. You keep doing what you're doing. You keep walking your walk. Don't take any shit. But if you do, please do it with grace.